We don't have anything more to send over there ourselves. We're entirely dependent upon air and naval power to try and compensate for the very small and inadequate ground forces that we have. All of this is bluster and nonsense. They think the Russians are buffaloed. The Russians are not buffaloed. The Russians know the score, and eventually, if we continue down this road, they will advance and we will be subject to missile attack. We will see installations inside NATO destroyed. And if you think that the NATO states are going to collectively come together and scream bloody murder for nuclear war with Russia, well, you're very much mistaken. Welcome back to our ongoing analysis of the battlefield developments in Ukraine. Over the past few days, we've witnessed significant movements, particularly from Russian forces across several critical fronts, from the regions of Volokhorovka to Kay and even Sumy. The situation has escalated, presenting dire challenges for Ukrainian defenses. As Colonel Douglas Macgregor recently stated, the situation in Ukraine is rapidly deteriorating for Kiev, with Russia demonstrating superior strategic and operational planning. His observations echo much of what we will explore today. Let us begin with the fresh developments in KK. Russian forces have reportedly crossed the border near Plio, advancing into Ukrainian territory. This marks a significant escalation, as it is the first confirmed incursion into the Sumy region since the campaign began. Yesterday, Russian forces liberated a 3.5-kilometer stretch near OLX, India, a critical area that holds strategic value for both advancing forces and the defensive posture of Ukraine. The move aligns with a broader tactical goal of reducing Ukraine's territorial salience. By targeting OLX India, Russian forces aim to create a bridgehead to launch deeper incursions into Sumy. This strategy, as many analysts including Colonel Douglas Macgregor have pointed out, showcases Russia's ability to dictate the terms of engagement. It forces Ukraine into a defensive and reactive stance, stretching its resources even thinner across multiple fronts. In parallel with the developments on the ground, we've seen an extraordinary escalation in Russia's use of unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. Since June, Russian UAV strikes have increased at an exponential rate, with operations doubling month over month. By November alone, over 2,500 drones struck Ukrainian infrastructure, targeting everything from energy grids to military installations. This surge is a hallmark of Russia's evolving strategy to undermine Ukraine's capacity to sustain its war effort. Colonel Douglas Macgregor has spoken at length about the transformative impact of UAVs in modern warfare, calling them precision tools that reshape the battlefield without excessive manpower costs. Indeed, Russia's UAV campaign demonstrates a significant shift away from reliance on traditional manpower-intensive tactics. Instead, these unmanned systems, both reconnaissance and strike-capable, are being deployed to disrupt Ukrainian defenses on a massive scale. The growing use of UAVs and the intensification of ground offensives are not isolated developments. They are part of a broader strategic consolidation by Russia. This consolidation is underpinned by a massive surge in military production. Roscos, Russia's largest defense manufacturer, recently reported unprecedented increases across the board. Compared to 2022, weapons production has surged tenfold. Artillery systems have seen a 6-fold increase, tank munitions 30-fold, and short-range missiles 14-fold. This scale of production is not just remarkable, it's historic. It signals Russia's determination to sustain and escalate its military operations well into 2025. Such numbers align with statements from Russian leadership, emphasizing the need to achieve clear objectives in Ukraine. President Putin himself has underscored the importance of sustaining these efforts, citing the strategic necessity of overwhelming Ukraine's military and logistical capacity. Colonel Macgregor has often remarked on Russia's ability to leverage its industrial base for prolonged conflicts, noting that wars of attrition favor nations with deep reserves and production capabilities. His insights find clear validation in these statistics. Moscow's relentless focus on expanding its arsenal assures that it can maintain pressure across multiple fronts, from the skies with UAVs to the battlefields with advanced artillery systems. The broader implications are clear. This level of production is not only fueling the immediate conflict, but also preparing Russia for the long game. As Ukrainian forces continue to face attrition, the disparity in production capacity between the two nations becomes increasingly pronounced. Russia's ability to replace lost equipment and munitions at a faster rate than Ukraine can replenish its supplies tilts the balance further in Moscow's favor. Ultimately, this strategic consolidation reaffirms Russia's commitment to achieving its objectives in Ukraine. It reflects a level of resolve and preparedness that will shape the trajectory of this conflict for months, if not years to come. Back on the front line, the intensified use of UAVs continues to erode Ukraine's ability to maintain effective operations. Reports suggest that Russian forces are deploying over 3,000 drones per month, targeting Ukraine's logistical networks and infrastructure. Each strike, while seemingly small in isolation, acts as a pin, gradually weakening the combat readiness of Ukrainian units along critical fronts in the east and south. Consider the compounded effect of such tactics. When supply convoys are disrupted, Ukrainian frontline units face delays in receiving ammunition, medical supplies, and reinforcements. This creates cascading challenges, forcing commanders to make difficult choices, whether to prioritize one sector over another or spread their already thin resources even thinner. Such dilemmas, created by relentless UAV strikes, steadily tilt the balance in Russia's favor. Colonel Douglas Macgregor has described this type of warfare as a slow bleed, a deliberate and calculated strategy to wear down the opponent over time. By focusing on infrastructure, supply lines, and command nodes, Russia is not just degrading Ukraine's military capacity, but also targeting the morale of its forces. Imagine being a soldier on the front lines, constantly grappling with shortages while under the shadow of unrelenting aerial attacks. This psychological toll is as significant as the physical damage inflicted by the strikes. Meanwhile, Russia's dual-front approach compounds these difficulties. By advancing in these regions, Moscow forces Kiev to redistribute troops, pulling them away from other critical sectors. For Ukraine, this means leaving key positions vulnerable or risking overextending their defenses. The strategic brilliance of this approach lies in its ability to stretch Ukrainian forces to their breaking point without requiring significant Russian loss. Looking beyond Ukraine, it is essential to consider the broader strategic picture. Moscow's recalibration of its global strategy offers insights into its long-term intentions. Following a partial withdrawal from extended operations in Syria, Russia has redirected critical resources to reinforce its special military operation in Ukraine. This shift demonstrates a strategic prioritization of conflicts that directly impact Russian national interests. The lessons learned from Syria are now being applied in Ukraine. In Syria, Moscow perfected its ability to operate in complex, multi-theater environments. These operations involve the coordination of air, ground, and logistical assets across vast distances. This experience has proven invaluable in managing the challenges of a high-intensity conflict like the one in Ukraine. Colonel Douglas Macgregor has emphasized the importance of such experience, noting that Russia's ability to adapt and recalibrate its strategy in real time is a critical factor in its operational success. By scaling back its involvement in the Middle East, Russia has not abandoned its interest in the region, but rather shifted focus to areas of greater immediate importance. This strategic pivot underscores Moscow's adaptability and its willingness to make calculated sacrifices for long-term gains. In doing so, it has freed up resources, including advanced weaponry, experienced personnel, and financial support, all of which are now being deployed in Ukraine. The redeployment of resources has allowed Russia to escalate its efforts on the Ukrainian front. This is evident in the surge of military production and the increased tempo of operations. For instance, the lessons from Syria in terms of integrating air and ground campaigns are reflected in the coordination between UAV strikes and ground offensives in Ukraine. Similarly, the logistical networks established during the Syrian conflict have informed Russia's ability to sustain high operational intensity over extended periods. Furthermore, this shift also reflects a broader geopolitical strategy. By focusing on Ukraine, Russia is sending a clear signal to the West. Its primary objective is to secure its sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. The ongoing conflict is not just a military operation but a broader assertion of sovereignty and strategic autonomy. For Moscow, success in Ukraine would not only secure its borders but also reassert its position as a global power capable of challenging Western dominance. In conclusion, the recalibration of Russia's global strategy highlights its ability to navigate complex geopolitical landscapes. From Syria to Ukraine, Moscow has demonstrated a unique capacity to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining its core objectives. As Macgregor has noted, this adaptability is a hallmark of Russian strategic thinking, a quality that will likely define its approach to conflicts for years to come. As we reflect on these developments, one thing becomes increasingly evident. Russia's actions in Ukraine are not impulsive or reactionary, but rather part of a calculated strategy designed to reshape the geopolitical landscape. This war is being fought on multiple fronts, through ground offensives in places like Sumy and Kherson, sustained aerial campaigns using thousands of drones, and an unparalleled surge in industrial production to maintain military momentum. The strategic depth that Russia is pursuing is not merely about territorial gains, it is about securing a position of dominance that extends far beyond Ukraine's borders. By striking critical infrastructure, dismantling logistical networks and applying unrelenting pressure across multiple regions, Russia is forcing Ukraine into a corner. Colonel Douglas Macgregor aptly summarized this dynamic when he observed, "The Russians are fighting for strategic depth and survival while Ukraine is increasingly trapped in a Western narrative that prioritizes image over substance." His words underscore the reality that Ukraine faces not only a military challenge but also a political dilemma, one shaped by the competing interests of its allies and the realities on the battlefield. Consider the broader implications of this conflict. For Ukraine, the stakes are existential. The pressure to deliver victories to satisfy Western backers has left its military stretched thin, while Russian forces, buoyed by industrial output and superior coordination, continue to dictate the terms of engagement. For the West, the question becomes whether the support for Ukraine can be sustained indefinitely, particularly as domestic pressures mount in donor countries. For Russia, the cost of this campaign is significant, but the rewards, strategic depth, territorial control, and a weakened NATO presence on its borders, make the sacrifices worthwhile. Furthermore, the role of industrial capability cannot be overstated. The ability to produce weapons, drones, and ammunition at unprecedented scales has allowed Russia to maintain its operational tempo, even as sanctions aim to cripple its economy. As Macgregor has pointed out, wars of attrition are won by those who can sustain their efforts the longest. Russia's capacity to do so places it in a strong position to shape the outcome of this war, while Ukraine's dependence on external aid highlights its vulnerabilities. The skies over Ukraine, filled with drones and the battles raging on the ground in places like Sumy and Kherson, tell the story of a conflict that has moved into a phase of grinding intensity. Each strike, each maneuver, and each advance is part of a broader plan. A plan that aims to redefine the balance of power in Eastern Europe and beyond. This war is not just about borders, it is about influence, survival, and the reshaping of a post-Cold War order. As Colonel Macgregor reminded us, the stakes are high for all parties involved. For Russia, this war is a test of resilience and resolve. For Ukraine, it is a fight for survival, waged under the weight of international scrutiny and domestic strain. And for the West, it is a moment of reckoning, a challenge to its unity and its capacity to influence outcomes in an increasingly multipolar world. Thank you for joining us in this comprehensive analysis. Stay tuned for continued updates and insights as this pivotal conflict unfolds, shaping not only the future of Ukraine, but the contours of global geopolitics itself.